Hello students, and welcome back to Unit 8, the Pythagorean Theorem and Irrational Numbers. Today we are working on applications of the Pythagorean Theorem, and we are answering the question, how can we find the length of a diagonal of a rectangular prism? Again, I am Emma Reed. I am an 8th grade math teacher, and thank you for joining me today. Now we'll move on to our introduction/launch on slide A. And on this slide, we can see we have an image of a rectangular prism with the diagonal shown in blue here. And for your introduction/launch, you're answering the questions, what do you notice and what do you wonder? Take your time to think about that question, both questions, and answer in the blue rectangles. Now that you've had some time to think about these questions and write your responses, which should sound like, I noticed blank, and I wonder blank, and it should be clear for your reader and for any partner you might be sharing with to understand your thinking and where it came from in the image. If all of those things are true, you're ready to move on to slide B, the first part of our Explore section. So on slide B, we are asked the question, which figure do you think has the longer diagonal? Note that the figures are not drawn to scale. So you're going to base it on the measurements that were given. So we have prism K, where the height is 6, the width is 4, and the length is 5. And then we have prism L, where the height, width, and length are all 5. So take some time to think about what have we learned so far that might help you here, and which do you think will have the longer diagonal and why? Just like on the previous slide, you want to make sure that it's clear to your reader or to your partner exactly where your evidence is to support your claim. So if you're claiming that you think the diagonal for prism K will be longer, you're going to be explaining your reasoning. How do you know? And same for prism L. So double check your work, make sure your evidence is clear, and then we'll move on to the next slide of our Explore section, slide C. And now we are responsible for actually calculating the diagonals. So we're looking more closely at prism K, where again we have a height of 6, a width of 4, and a length of 5, and we are determining what is the length of this diagonal. And for this section, I have another site that you can go to if it helps you to be able to move the prism around to see more clearly. So I'll show the link to that website now. And then I'll navigate there so we can kind of visualize the prism a little more clearly. So here we are on Geogebra, and the only goal here is just to be able to see what our cube looks like from the bottom, from the sides, and you can always explore and move it around on your own. And imagine that you have the values written in. So depending on which prism you're looking at, you'll have different heights, lengths, and widths. And you're just imagining what can you use that you already know that would help you figure out the length of this diagonal. What does this remind you of? What do we know for sure? So you can feel free to spend as much time in that app as you would like if it helps you. And either way, your goal here on slide C is to figure out what the length of the diagonal is. And then again, you want to make sure your evidence is clear. How do you know that the diagonal is whatever length you calculate? State your point very clearly in the blue box. And when you're ready, we'll move on to slide D. So here we are on slide D, where we have an actual cube, because the height, length, and width of this prism are the same. And our goal is again to determine the length of this diagonal. So pause and consider that question, do your calculations. And when you're ready, we'll move ahead to slide F. So now we have prism K and prism L in the same place again. And we're going back to that question of which of the two figures has the longest diagonal. But now, hopefully, based on your thinking and your calculations, you have more justification for which diagonal has the longer length. So based on your point that you're going to make in the top rectangle about which of the two figures has the longest diagonal with the new evidence that you've gathered, once you've paused and explained that clearly, you're going to look at the second question on this slide, which is what generalizations can you make about the diagonal of a rectangular prism? So let's take a minute and think about this word generalizations, because this is a word that will come up frequently for you in math, because it's something that mathematicians do all the time. So to make a generalization means that you take specific examples and you come up with a more general pattern from them. So to make a generalization, think back to the types of calculations you were able to do on these prisms to find the length of the diagonal. And the generalization part is going to be anything you did that you think would apply to any prism. So if we completely changed all of the lengths here, what parts of the math you did today would still apply in every case? And that's what you're going to put into this question about generalizations. And so you'll be pausing to think in just a minute about what generalizations can you make about the diagonal of a rectangular prism. So what did you do today that you think you can apply to any prism when you're trying to find the diagonal? So now that you've taken your time with slide F and you've made your generalization about the diagonal of rectangular prisms, we're going to summarize on slide G and go back to our big question for the lesson. So you will be recording your response to the focus question on the left, and our focus question was, how can we find the length of the diagonal of a rectangular prism? So what you wrote for your generalization should help you here. And then as always on the right, you can use that space to record any notes from the lesson summary that you want to keep in mind for the future. Thank you for joining me today. Have a beautiful day.